God. What is it, and what does it mean, if anything, with regard to the meaning and purpose of our lives? With regard to what God is, there are only two useful possibilities to consider. Either God is absolutely everything, the all, or the totality of all that exists, both the material and the immaterial, or God is something less than everything, less than the all. And there's no third possibility. Some theists at this stage will object that their God is not less than everything, but nor is he everything, because he's more than everything. But that's not logically possible, and so that argument can be dismissed out of hand. Let's examine each of the two possibilities in more detail. Firstly, let's consider a God that is not everything, and is therefore less than everything. In that case, such a God is necessarily an ordinary, finite being like ourselves. He may be rational or irrational, truthful or untruthful, good or evil, or a combination of good and evil. If such a God wants us to share his purpose, then he'd have to convince us that his purpose is better than the one we already have. And if we think that his purpose is irrational, dishonest, or ignoble in some way, then we are fully justified in rejecting his purpose and even trying to convince him to adopt our own. The only other possibility for God, and which I mentioned, is that God is everything, the all, the totality of all that exists, both the material and the immaterial. In this case, God would be identical to nature, in the case that nature too is a label for the all. Mother Nature and God the Father would be one and the same thing. And of course, this God can't be conscious, because consciousness requires an object of consciousness. And in the case of the all, there is nothing else. There is nothing else to be conscious of, by definition. So what can be said of purpose in this case? Atheists are often accused of being without purpose. But is this video that you're now watching without purpose? Is it only a result of random chance? Clearly not. Nature has ways in which it operates, and I and what I do are the result of those laws of nature. In fact, that which I do is fully determined by nature, and chance doesn't play any role whatsoever. What happens because nature, the infinite web of causes, has determined it to be so. And if we understand that God and nature are one and the same thing, not a conscious being, of course, but an infinite one, then much religious language suddenly becomes meaningful. All of a sudden, we may understand how one can be a son of God at the same time as being one with God and being God. I'll leave you now with a few words of a Meister Eckhart, who was a German philosopher and mystic. He says, "All things are simply God, to thee who seest only God in all things. Like one who looks long at the sun, he encounters the sun in whatever he afterwards looks at. If this is lacking, this looking for and seeing God in all and sundry, then thou lackest this birth." As the drop becomes the ocean, so the soul is deified, losing her name and work, but not her essence. The eye by which I see God is the same eye as the eye by which God sees me. My eye and God's eye are one and the same. According to the Scriptures, No man knoweth the Father but the Son. And hence, if ye desire to know God, ye have to be not merely like the Son, ye have to be the very Son himself.